Yes, hello everyone. We'll get started on this morning's panel. The topic is Building the Pacific Northwest Future, Higher Education, Innovation, and Economic Growth. And my name is Bill Flanagan, and I'm President Vice Chancellor of the University of Alberta. And I thought just as a little bit of an opening remarks to our panel discussion, I'd tell you a little bit about the University of Alberta. We're right here in Edmonton. We're a large university, 48,000 students. About 20% of those students are students from around the world. So we're a real talent magnet for students coming all around the world to study here in Edmonton. We were established in 1906, the year after the province of Alberta was established. So one of the things we're talking about today is innovation and economic growth. And this is really part of the DNA of the University of Alberta. As soon as the province of Alberta was established, one of the first acts of the Legislative Assembly of Alberta was to establish a university, that is the University of Alberta, recognizing that a university was going to be central to the development of the province of Alberta, its economy, socially and economically. So being an engine of economic growth and innovation is part of the very DNA of the University of Alberta. And over the years, we've had an enormous contribution to the economic development of Alberta and the region. Beginning first with energy and the environment. And as you know, of course, Alberta is an energy superpower, one of the largest producers of energy in the world. And it was at the University of Alberta that we developed the technology that enabled Alberta to unlock the value of the oil sands. And I grew up in Alberta, and I remember as a kid hearing all about this incredible resource in northern Alberta that we could not access because it was trapped in sand, and we did not have the technology that enabled us to access this resource. And it was scientists, particularly chemists at the University of Alberta, that developed the technology that enabled the development of the oil sands, and of course that led to the development of an energy sector here in Alberta of such importance to Alberta and to Canada. And so that continues to be an area of tremendous research expertise at the University of Alberta, supporting Alberta's energy sector. And one of the things that we would do at the University of Alberta is, of course, we're thinking about the future of energy systems, and particularly the need to reduce emissions. And we've launched a research project called the Canadian Net Zero Energy Solutions, and the head of this research project is with us here today, Amit Kumar. Amit Kumar is one of the world's leading experts on hydrogen research. And so at the Canadian Net Zero Energy Solutions, what we call CANZES, we're focusing on a number of areas of energy futures that involve reduction of emissions, particularly focusing on hydrogen. This is Alberta is the largest producer of hydrogen, I believe, in the world. Is that right, Amit? Hydrogen is a very important part of the oil and gas industry in Alberta. So we have a lot of expertise in the production, storage, and utilization of hydrogen. One of the great advantages of hydrogen, of course, is when you burn it, it has no emissions. Its only output is pure water. So the world is very interested in hydrogen, both the production, storage, utilization, and transportation of hydrogen. And here in Alberta, we believe there's an enormous opportunity to take our natural gas resources to produce hydrogen, but also at the University of Alberta, we're looking at other ways to produce hydrogen, particularly through the use of catalysts and electrolysis. Very interesting ways, novel ways to produce hydrogen that could be enable the production of hydrogen around the world. And we're also looking at ways to store, transport, and use hydrogen. Hydrogen is a complex material. It's very difficult to store and transport. And again, at the University of Alberta, we have a lot of expertise in the hydrogen, and we're using that hydrogen to explore what the future of hydrogen can be as part of a reduction of emissions in the world. We're also the world leader in carbon capture, utilization, and storage, very important part of the energy sector here in Alberta. Critical minerals is also another area of the CANZES, the Canadian Net Zero Energy Solutions. Critical minerals being so important to a world where we're going to become more and more dependent upon electricity. Batteries, critical minerals will play a very important role. Also electrical grids, and we have a great expertise in artificial intelligence I'll talk about in a moment, and using AI to improve the efficient operation of electrical grids. And then water and land reclamation. Any large energy project always has environmental impacts. Again, the University of Alberta is a world leader in thinking about the reduction of those environmental impacts. So energy, again, part of the DNA of the University of Alberta and part, of course, of the pillar of Alberta's economy. Second area of great research expertise, and again with huge economic implications, and we'll be talking a lot about this in the panel today, is artificial intelligence. University of Alberta ranked among the top 5 in the world in AI research, top 2 in Canada. We're home to Rich Sutton, who received the Turing Award in 2024, which is the Nobel Prize in Computer Science. And Rich wrote a book about 20 years ago that he continues to update called Reinforcement Learning. Rich invented the field of reinforcement learning. That is a field of how machines can learn. And again, the University of Alberta has really been on the forefront of developing AI research. We're now, and we're also partnered closely with the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute, one of the 3 centers of AI excellence as part of the federal national strategy on AI. So AI is a huge area of importance at the University of Alberta, and now no longer confined just to computer science. We have chairs in AI that go throughout the university because AI is having a huge impact on research throughout the university in energy, engineering, health, social sciences and humanities, fundamental science. All AI is having an enormous impact throughout the university, and we'll be talking, I'm sure, a little bit more about that. And health is another area of longstanding strength at the University of Alberta. We're home to Dr. Michael Houghton, who received the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2020 for having discovered the virus that causes hepatitis C. And this was for those of you old enough in the room, you'll remember there was a time when there was a hepatitis virus circulating. We called it non-A, non-B. We didn't know what it was. We didn't know how it was transmitted, and we had not identified the virus. But we knew that it could be transmitted through blood transfusions, and we had no way to prevent this because we had not yet identified the virus and could not isolate it. And it was Dr. Michael Houghton who identified that virus, and very shortly thereafter enabled the world to secure the blood supply to prevent any further transmission of hepatitis C. And it's from that discovery that, again, at the University of Alberta, we developed treatments for hepatitis C, which is now a curable disease. And Dr. Michael Houghton right now is working on a vaccine for hepatitis C, which will soon go into human trials here at the University of Alberta. So health is another area of core impact for the university. And finally, and this is really a foundational area for the University of Alberta, was agriculture. And of course, early in the founding of the province, agriculture was such an important industry and remains a key industry of importance for the University of Alberta. And one of the many discoveries that I can point to is quantum canola enabled the development of a strain of canola that was disease resistant, that basically preserved and saved a multi-billion-dollar industry here in Alberta, here in Canada. So that's just a little bit about the University of Alberta and our own commitment around innovation and economic growth. And I finally want to introduce our VP of International Innovation and Enterprise, Dave Bressler, who is here. This is a VP portfolio that is specifically aimed at industry collaboration. So any industry partners in the room who are interested in talking to the University of Alberta about any of the research areas that I mentioned and more, we have an office that is designed specifically to engage with industry partners on industry level, university-wide collaboration. Again, trying to once again demonstrate the University of Alberta's importance to the economy of Alberta and the region, and indeed of global impact. So that's just a little bit of my presidential spiel about what a great university the University of Alberta is. It's a part of my job description that I should be able to give a good spiel, and I hope you enjoyed that. But with that, no, thank you. But with that, I'm now very pleased to introduce my panelists who have joined me here today. Löki Gail Tobin is a senator and chair of the Alaska Senate Education Committee. Thank you very much for joining us here today. My colleague, Baljit Singh from the University of Saskatchewan, is the vice president research, and I can add that we work very closely with the University of Saskatchewan, both on health and agriculture, and I'm sure many other areas of great strength at the University of Saskatchewan. We also have with us Joy Emory, who is the president and CEO of Workforce Snohomish County in Washington State. Thank you. And finally, Shannon Marchand, who is the Deputy Minister of Advanced Education at the Government of Alberta. And of course, I know Shannon well because we talk all the time. And very delighted to have you.
I've heard the spiel. before.
Yeah, you could give the spiel, couldn't you? Yes, indeed. And so, with that, I'll first turn to you, Löki, and you could perhaps introduce yourself. And this is an opportunity for you to give your spiel, and then we will turn to a conversation. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you again for inviting me to be on the panel. I am a last minute addition, and it is a little overwhelming to be here with such wonderful panelists who will be able to bring a lot more of the technical components to this conversation. And before I begin, I want to give you a little bit of an understanding of who I am and where I come from. I was born and raised in a place called Nome, Alaska, which for those who are familiar with Alaska, it is the farthest most western point, unless you decide to leave the continental United States and take a tiny boat to St. Lawrence Island. I am a product of our state's public education system. I'm a graduate of the University of Alaska Anchorage. I hold a master's degree from the University of Alaska Fairbanks in rural development. I participated in a program called Peace Corps Masters International. And for those who are unfamiliar with the Peace Corps, it is our third option when there is not going to be a military action in a country. Instead, we send young Americans to go share their skills and knowledge with other host country nationals. And I did an extended service and spent 4 years in the country of Azerbaijan working with young people and trying to help them engage in economic development. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, focused on Indigenous studies, particularly in Indigenous education pedagogy. The shorthand way of explaining that is I really care about hyper-localized education systems. I want young people to be able to live in the communities in which they're raised and be vibrant contributors to their economic growth. So that's not just about having a career or a pathway toward a wage, but also being able to engage in subsistence activities, feeling like they can be a participant in the civics process, maybe advance toward a seat in their state legislature if they so choose to do so. I also chair the Senate Education Committee. I have been the chair for the last 4 years. Prior to that, I was a legislative staffer for all the staffers here in the room who know how important it is in the government process to have those young people helping us do our work. I also sit on the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, or WICHE, and I also am a vice chair of the Standing Education Committee for the National Conference of State Legislatures, where I also sit on the Higher Education Task Force. As for those who are familiar with HR 1, there has been some pretty significant changes in the higher education landscape across the United States in the last few years. So in preparing for today's panel, I've been thinking a lot about how could I add value to this conversation? What's the unique lane that I can fill? And I want to share a very brief story with you. I recently took my father to France. He turned 77, and he very much wanted to see where his father fought in World War II. So we went to Normandy on D-Day, and just for my own treat, I decided to take a trip up through Bordeaux because I think I should be able to drink wine with my father, who's 77, while traveling. And while we were in one of the wineries, there was a much older woman who was questioning the tour guide about their process of kind of learning about the soil and the sampling and being able to have the correct mixtures for the grapes and how long they aged their product. And this young man was explaining to her that there was a very old gentleman who comes from a line of other folks who've been engaged in this winemaking project for generations. And she stopped him and said, well, why don't you just have AI do it? AI could take all that information and then produce the same result that this gentleman who's trained for years and years and years has provided for you. And this young man said, well, why do we need AI? We got the guy. And she said, well, the guy can do it, but AI could be more efficient. It would be a better product. And he said, well, would it be a better product? Just because AI can do it, should AI do it? And this woman looked very complex, and he pressed and said, do you want to drink AI wine? And for me, I think that's the big question that I just have been tackling with as a policymaker. We're kind of at the cusp of this big new world where AI is being poised to replace workers. It's being told that it's going to produce efficiencies and it's going to get rid of certain unneeded labor positions. And the question I keep asking myself is, but do we need it to? Is that actually going to improve our social fabrics and networks? Is this going to make us a more resilient community? All across the United States, I think here in Canada as well, we're experiencing declining birth rates. We know that immigration has slowed in the United States. And there is an idea that with the AI build out, that will actually be a good thing. That's going to be a better product for us as a nation. But the question I keep having is especially as a student who has been grappling with how do I use AI to produce my unique research, to talk with the communities and to work with them, particularly as I am in the social sciences. I do not know if AI is going to be the replacement mechanism for some of this critical work we need in our communities, the HR specialists, the folks who help connect you in a philanthropic way to causes that matter that you can contribute in your community, the special education aides who are helping our students who have so much potential, but it's so locked inside sometimes that they need additional extra push. So I'm here to kind of bring that lens to the conversation. I love talking about all the other types of workforce development. I very much understand that aligning our education systems with our workforce pathways is a critical function of government. It's a critical function of how we inspire economic growth. But I think there are some big, hairy questions that we all need to be asking ourselves. And I hope that you're asking of your policymakers, because we want a community that's thriving. And sometimes that's antithetical to this whole technological evolution. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited for the questions, and hopefully I can add some value to the conversation.
Oh, thank you. You've thrown out a great challenge there, and a conversation item that we're sure to pick up on.
Yes.
Baljit.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Bill, thank you for pulling this panel together. Very happy to be here. So I'm at University of Saskatchewan. I currently serve in the role of Vice President Research there. I have been at University of Calgary in my role as the Dean of the Veteran School. So I have some Alberta experience from 2016 till 21 in the middle of the pandemic. I grew up in India in a rural agricultural setting. And my education brought me to Guelph, Ontario, then to Texas, where I fell in love with football because that was the only way to have a social life in that town. And then landed up in New York and back into Canada in Saskatchewan, where we have Rough Riders, the best team in the CFL. Don't argue. Yeah. But we don't want to get into that debate. So at University of Saskatchewan, there are many things which happen. I won't go into the detail of those. They might come during the panel discussion by way of the examples. Universities are very interesting entities, as we know. They have been around for centuries, from the old civilizations till the modern university concept, which was set up in Berlin in 1805 or 10, which is now the Humboldt University. So the nature of the universities is always to provide education, discover new knowledge, and share that with the communities. And those fundamentals have not changed. And some of the differences are that compared to things in the past, now we have a lot more young people coming to universities, not only in the Western world, but also around the globe. So that really brings a lot of hope to the communities in every country, that through education, the communities will prosper, they will become sustainable, there will be reduced conflict in the world, because quite a bit of the conflict is generated out of economic inequalities, which go back to inequalities in education that communities have, whether in Canada or in India or in somewhere else. So universities play that very fundamental role. What is changing in the universities, especially in Canada, is the intentionality with which the universities are placing themselves in the environment regionally, provincially, and nationally. I believe there's a fundamental shift which is taking place in Canada as to how the universities are going to operate to catalyze a sustainable way of prosperity and equitable way of prosperity in this country. And within that, how they are going to strengthen the regional collaboration across provincial borders, and how they are going to position Canada as a global player when it comes to all matters of international relationships, from education to discovery to trade and things like that. Last point I will make is the province of Saskatchewan, where the university is, and it carries the name of the province. Saskatchewan is emerging as a major player, not only in Canada, but around the globe, largely because it has 40% of Canada's agricultural land. It has one third of the potash deposits of the world. It has one third of high grade uranium that's present in the world. So if you are going to do food security, we are going to find a balanced combination of various sources of energy or if we are going to figure out how to grow crops in a better way, I think Saskatchewan will be playing a major role in that. And the university and the Saskatchewan government and the province, they go hand in hand together when we do our work together. So that is the intentionality between the university and the province. And the last point before I close off is the DNA of the University of Saskatchewan is about partnerships and collaboration. And that's why I'm so passionate about the role that I have, because most of the partnerships are around research, innovation, commercialization, and driving economic development and prosperity within the province and our country, and possibly in the Pacific Northwest together. That's where University of Saskatchewan really succeeds as a collaborating partner, quite often being a member of a team and really moving things forward, doing whatever it can on a given day. So really look forward to the discussion with the panel. Thank you very much.
Hello. So my name is Joy Emory. I'm the president and CEO of Workforce Snohomish. What is that? We are a nonprofit organization that is designated to oversee the public workforce development funding in Snohomish County. So Everett, Boeing, IonQ, Helion, Zap Energy. In the United States, we have a system. It's federally funded, sometimes state supported, philanthropic, private sector. And oftentimes, I feel like I'm a little downstream from the conversation here. So my background is workforce and economic development for 30 years. I've worked in higher education. I've worked in economic development. I've worked at community and technical colleges, nonprofit associations, and I always say workforce development, while it should be a rigorous discipline, is not a career choice. It's something that you fall into. And the reason why I stayed there was because of opportunity. Because when I reflect on my academic experience and my and family and generations of those that went to college, those that couldn't go to college, and the opportunities to move into STEM education, was that we needed a better system to support access, inclusion to higher education, to high-paying, family-sustaining careers. And we didn't want doors to shut. We wanted them to open, okay? And so the public workforce development system in the United States is flawed. It is inherently flawed. We are rooted in 1950s legislation. We are reactive and failure-based. Okay? So when we talk about AI, when we talk about quantum computing, when we talk about K-12 and access to higher education and the importance of access to higher education in so many different ways, what I see is doors closing, and then I see the downstream effects. So when technology, by and large, when industry change, when economies change, when investments, when politics changes, we get the individuals that are impacted by that. So right now in Snohomish County, we have our top 5 thereabouts. Highest unemployment rate is software engineers, project managers, electricians, carpenters. So the impact of AI, the impact of infrastructure spending or a lack thereof, of interest rates, we encounter those individuals at varying degrees. So where is my concern in all of this? It's not that AI is displacing individuals. It's what do we do when we're talking about talent shortages, for which we have spoken about for my entire career, right? We talk about the valley of death for entrepreneurs and startup businesses. There is the same thing in play for workers. And so really focusing on how do we bridge that valley of death? We need to harness our talent, and we need to do it proactively. And so what are the solutions to that? We talk about universities and how to get people in, how K-12 education, how importance, rigor, academics, preparation, options, whether it be the trades, whether it be on-the-job training, university, and that there shouldn't be any wrong door, but in reality there is. And so in the quantum panel, I heard there's a front door, right? There is no wrong door in some areas. And I really want to talk more about that as we look at disruptive change, as we look at the power and the economic drivers of our universities, of our businesses, I think we need to talk about how to get scrappy and how to align our policy and how to really think about how we systemically change a system that is has been around since the dawn of time, right? And that we think about things incrementally rather than how life and business really reacts, how technology disrupts those patterns, how the cost of living, of raising a family, of the realities of software engineer that is displaced, that made $250,000 for 20 years, is now unemployed and thinking about how to support their $1 million home and taxes and their kids that want to go to university, and all these variables that impact lives. Or the individual that was dislocated from manufacturing because of automation, that has an innate understanding of that organization, of that business, that goes home and tells their kids that dad or mom has lost their job, and the implications of that for those children and of that family. And so I really think we have to think fundamentally differently about how we do workforce development as an ecosystem involving universities, colleges, trades, industry, nonprofits, philanthropy. It has to be an all-in, because the technology challenges of today, of the innovation, I believe the future is bright. I very much want that hydrogen car, please. There's so many different things that are bright in our future that can solve challenges, reduce conflict, but at the same time, the implications for society, for our children, for ourselves, matters. And we need to think structurally and fundamentally differently about our systems and how we work together. And I think not only is it a grand challenge, it's a phenomenal opportunity for innovation and creativity in what I call workforce development, which is holistic in its approach. So look forward to the conversation.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Shannon, Marchand, I'm the Deputy Minister of Advanced Education, a proud alum of the U of A, a longtime member of the Alberta Public Service. And I spent a fair amount of time in my career on sort of the workforce development issues that you've just described. And I thought what I would do is maybe highlight a little bit of how we approach post-secondary education, higher education in the province. And one of the things that I think we're probably a little bit unique about is we have a single piece of legislation, the Post-Secondary Learning Act, that covers all of our public post-secondary institutions. So we don't have a Universities Act and then a Colleges Act and then another thing. It's all under one piece of legislation, and we really try to think in a systemic way, probably not as effectively as the challenge you sort of put to us, but I mean, we do try to think about what are the roles of the 27 post-secondary institutions in this province, of which the University of Alberta is one of 4 comprehensive academic research universities. We have a number of polytechnic institutions. We have a number of community colleges, and a couple of other maybe outliers within our system, as well as undergraduate universities. So universities that don't have the same research mandate but are focused on undergraduate education. As we do that work, we're really guided by a strategy, Alberta 2030, building skills for jobs, and its focus is on ensuring that we are enabling Albertans who engage in our system to develop the skills to be successful in their pursuits, in their lives, whatever that entails. But that we have a system that's strongly labor market focused, has innovative programming, commercialization of research, all to lead to a prosperous and innovative province. And I think Bill did a good job at the outset of describing the role our post-secondary institutions, and the University of Alberta in particular, have had in supporting economic growth in the province in terms of unlocking the oil sands, for example. We're looking at trying to respond to demand. So we have almost 300,000 learners in our publicly funded post-secondary system. We've created thousands of new spaces recently through targeted enrollment initiatives where we look to where there's needs in the labor force and issue calls for proposal to the institutions to respond with additional programming. Our apprenticeship system in the province is also part of my department. Much of the training happens within our colleges and polytechnic institutes. We have over 80,000 registered apprenticeships right now, highest number ever. Probably just about a doubling of what it was 6 or 7 years ago. We're also, in addition, so we're trying to expand volume. We're trying to ensure relevance of the programming. Some of that's through capital development at our institutions, so supporting things like a new advanced skills center at NAIT, the life sciences and innovative futures center at the University of Alberta, the multidisciplinary hub for the Faculty of Science at the University of Calgary, where by creating those new learning spaces, the way skills are acquired and the connection points between, I think, what used to be quite independent, independent disciplines, trying to bring those together. Our minister recently launched an AI panel to think about those questions about impact on the system in terms of how the post-secondary system works, as well as how graduates will succeed in the economy going forward. And then maybe the third piece I'd perhaps highlight is our real focus on research commercialization. The government's recently released an updated Alberta technology and innovation strategy, which highlights kind of key priority areas in terms of research and development. I think Bill touched on 4 of them. Maybe the one that wasn't covered was about advanced materials in aerospace, although there's a lot of capacity in our post-secondary system in that area. And as part of that, the government created a new intellectual property office to support awareness and protection and those commercialization efforts around research. And we are working on a new intellectual property framework that will help support those efforts as well. So lots there, lots of threads that connect, I think, across the line, and look forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, thank you, Shannon and panelists. First, I'd like to turn to a topic that many of you mentioned, and that is AI. And what is the impact of AI having on universities, on industry, on government, on society as a whole? And this is something we think a lot about at the University of Alberta. And I can tell you, at the University of Alberta, attitudes range from wild enthusiasm to arch skepticism, as you would expect in a university. We have very diverse views. And so what I've done is I put together a panel called the AI-Enabled University. And I said to my colleagues, we've got such extraordinary research expertise in artificial intelligence, but how are we thinking about applying that to what we do as a university in teaching and learning and research, and also in our administrative functions as a university? And we're doing all kinds of things in all of those areas. But I thought, let's try to pull this together and to think thoughtfully about what this means for the university and the university's role in society. So I put together, I'm calling it the President's Task Force on the AI-Enabled University. I'm pulling in everyone who's involved in teaching and learning and thinking about the implications for AI around that. Our research group, pulling them in, particularly thinking about how AI can be useful in applying for research grants and increasing our research performance. And then also thinking about the administrative functions of the university and how we can drive efficiencies and improve service levels through the use of artificial intelligence. So we just launched that. It's similar, I think, to what the minister has done here in Alberta. And as I say, there's a range of attitudes. When I pull this group together and we've started our conversations, it's a very interesting time for universities. We certainly do not yet have all the answers. But just for an example, I know in our classrooms, and our colleagues that are teaching in the classroom, they're really grappling with how to deal with the impact of AI. And I know at the University of Chicago, I'm a law professor, so I'm always thinking about the implications of artificial intelligence for the legal profession, which is enormous. I can only begin to imagine what the impact will be, and also what the impact is in the classroom. And I know at the University of Chicago, for example, I think it was last week announced that it was banning all devices in the classroom because it was very concerned that these devices would impair a student's ability to develop the cognitive skills necessary to be a legal professional. And I think that's one tact one might take, is to hope that this will all go away, or perhaps do we wrestle with this and think, how can we use AI to enhance learning? And one of the members of the panel, we have a student group on AI, primarily computer science students, and I met the president of this group last year, and I was just so impressed with her. And she was telling me about how she's using AI in the classroom to enhance her own experience around learning. And it was really impressive how she was using AI to develop quizzes for herself, to develop ways to interact with the material, such that AI really had become a tutor for her in assisting her in her learning. And it made me think that our students are in the digital age, while many of our colleagues, professors, are in the analog age. Our students are ahead of us when it comes to thinking about what AI can do. Of course, no surprise, our students are endlessly inventive, and they're on this stuff faster than you can imagine. So my question for the panel is, I'm curious to get your thoughts on how universities can engage responsibly with AI. And I know, Löki, you were talking about the social implications of this. And so I'm curious to hear if you could elaborate a little bit more, and in particular, what is the role of higher education?
That is a great question. And I'm going to take it from the perspective of the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. So we organize Western states to find a collaborative space so that we ensure that we're offering degree programs that it might not be possible to offer within our communities, but we have the ability to send a student out to get that credentialing. So I think of the medical school. Alaska does not have a medical school. We send our students to the University of Washington, and they are able to get their medical degree there. We don't have a school of pharmacy. We send our students to the University of Idaho to get their doctorate in pharmacy. One of the issues we've had on Witchy is that some of these programs, which have an application process in each of these Western states, are allowing for the students to write their essays with AI. And that means those states are actually having more competitive applicants comparative to the states that have prohibited the use of AI in those entry applications. And that has spurred an interesting conversation of not just about the administrative applications or the research applications or the classroom applications, but simply the entry applications. How do we create a fair and balanced system so that there's competition that is equitable amongst all user groups? Additionally, we are wondering about how do we ensure that there is the intellectual property component. So as I mentioned before, I'm a PhD student. My focus is on Indigenous education. AI and Indigenous education have a really interesting intersection, because who owns Indigenous knowledge? Should that be put into these large-scale language models so that it is then dispersed amongst groups that do not have a right to those stories, that do not have a right to that language, that do not have a right to that traditional ecological knowledge? These are really interesting and hairy questions that I think places like the University of Hawaii at Hilo are attempting to tackle, that we have these policy groups that are really trying to dig into. But the question is, again, is the science going to lead, or are we as a community going to step forward and say, let's figure out how do we create a better system where, you know, the tail isn't wagging the dog? For me, and something that I think quite a bit about, is the way that I use AI in my education system. Now, my professors are very much passionate about producing original research, and so I have to show every draft of my dissertation to ensure that it is my product. However, I do use a service called Grammarly, because I don't have access to a reference librarian, because unfortunately that is a career field that has really seen some attrition. And I do need to produce a product that is high quality and that is well vetted so that I can continue through the process. So it's interesting to figure out, how do we intermarry these systems and how do we find a balance? And what does that look like with a higher education system, or potentially within a state structure? I don't have the answers. I wish I did. I wish I could tell you guys this is exactly what you should go do. But I think these are questions that we have to grapple with, that we have to ask. You can't put your head in the sand, but you do need some of those people who ask those questions in the room, because if we're pretending like they don't exist, then we're not doing our due diligence.
Now,
There are AI is complex, of course, and there are a couple of ways I try to approach it in my role in the discussions at University of Saskatchewan. I mean, the first one is every technological development has created some sort of ripples in the society. When the copy and paste came in WordPerfect, everybody thought, gosh, who is going to write anything? People will copy and paste. And it was a struggle for me to get permission to write my PhD comprehensive exam by typing it on a computer at University of Guelph. They wanted me to write it in longhand. So I think these are the changes I want to situate the technology development within that. I think what we are dealing with is slightly different in a way. This whole thing is coming right after the pandemic. We dealt with massive turbulence in our society because of pandemic, unknowingly or without us really understanding. That unleashed a technological revolution through virtual meetings, connections around the world, and we are struggling with that. That indirectly sped up the development of artificial intelligence, machine learning tools, so that people can do their work remotely away from the offices. We don't need to meet with each one. I think so. The speed in the last 7-8 years that has come upon us is really causing lots of unsettlement in the society. The last piece, I think you said, Bill, or you said, Joy, is the definition of the skill. Universities impart skills. The biggest skill university would impart is how to read, how to critically analyze, how to write something by integrating material from 20 different books or journals. That's what we did. Now we are doing that with AI. AI pulls all of that for us. So what is the role of the teacher and the student in the learning process? At a very fundamental level, that is the question which we are dealing with. Out of that comes many policies and procedures, how to write questions, how to write papers, how to do examinations. That is the fundamental. Once we settle on what is the definition of the skills, then I think things will flow outright from that. As a VP research, I'm absolutely excited. The way artificial intelligence is speeding up identification of viruses, discovery of new drugs, target molecules. How do we look at the water flowing from the Rocky Mountains into the rivers? Can we develop the tools to understand the snowfall, irrigation, water distribution, and all of that? It's a very exciting time to be, but to get the fear out of it, we need to go to the fundamentals and place development of AI in the technological developments that have been taking place for more than 200 years. And then we will see where we have come up. And then the matter is the speed and how to develop the policy framework to deal with that. I'm sorry I'm making it too simple, but I don't. Thank you.
I love that answer. So I will join you in simplicity because I think there are some fundamentals around higher education's role in AI, and I'm going to go more towards the learner side, right? And so I as a mom, I have a 10-year-old that loves Minecraft. He spent years in the hospital, and all he did was Minecraft. And so I started talking about AI. And he was like, Mom, I want to do mods in Minecraft. And he was like, I was like, great. Well, let's get you a class and start learning how to do that. And he's like, AI can do it for me, Mom. Why would I do that? And I was like, AI cannot do it for you. Let me be very clear. You need to know what to input into AI. Otherwise, like the winemaker, you put it in AI, make me some wine, right? You are going to get heavens knows what, right? And so reinforcing that expertise in core subject matter in key skills is essential. So we know statistically that younger software developers are less likely to use AI than more senior programmers and developers. Why? Because the senior folks understand the subject matter and can engage AI in a meaningful way and flag it when it has inconsistencies or errors. The same goes for every discipline, right? And so I think it's really imperative to reinforce that. After doing this for so many years, the number one complaint I hear from employers, anyone know what it is? What can workers not do? Critical thinking. Mm-hmm. Critical thinking. So if you lean on AI to do your critical thinking, I guarantee you're not developing that skill. And so it's really an important component of higher education and education in general to really teach students how to think critically, whether it's about the world around them or a technology or a specific discipline, and to use AI as a tool to expand their knowledge, right? But their inputs into it especially at this point in time, but perhaps in perpetuity as that tool is replaced and innovative, is so critical for understanding. I'm seeing the same issue in employers. And as an employer myself, I have mandated use of AI across our business. We are small, we are scrappy, we have a lot of work to do. And I can tell the difference between employees that review and are thoughtful about their inputs versus those that perhaps need to get something done really quickly, right? And so we're seeing the same thing in industry, and industry is indeed grappling with AI implications. And higher education has a role in bridging that, as do the ecosystem, right? And so we need curriculum that is responsive, cost-effective, and can be modified quickly and agilely at the speed of technology and industry adoption. And in that, we can't ignore the non-technical components of that: governance, employee engagement, ethics. And so thinking about how do we deploy curriculum to upskill workers to ensure that they have an understanding that they're participatory, that they can assist their employers in adoption of AI. It's like the old adage about automation, right? If you don't have a good solid process, you just make a bad thing go faster. Let's think about that as we look at upskilling in AI in the workforce, and then certainly educating the future workforce around that critical thinking and the components and effective use of AI as a tool to extend knowledge and capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of the comments that have been made, and it was interesting. Prior to launching the panel, Minister McDougall hosted a roundtable, and there was a very interesting conversation that really gets to the point of like, what is the core, and if the point of the institutions has been the critical thinking and the synthesis, and they were talking about sort of pedagogy, right? So like, the marking of the essay is an artifact that is supposed, that we take as a proxy of your ability to do that synthesis. So if that no longer is your essay, if the AI has written it for you, or however, what is it gets at these very fundamental questions, as well as all the sort of tactical questions about how do we make the processes go more quickly within internal administration. How do we synthesize the work of the students? How does the students, of course, are engaging, as you described, Bill, right? They're engaging, and to your point, then what about the employers? What is it that employers are looking for? I think ultimately we as government need to come up with a point of view about what should be a reasonable expectation for graduates from the post-secondary system. It's not an easy question. It's not an easy question to wrestle with, and so hence a panel with a number of some AI experts, as well as economic expertise and institutional expertise, to try to synthesize some perspective and recommendations for the government. One of the things, I recently passed a bit of a career milestone, and so it's caused me to reflect on, how did I learn to do what I learned to do as a new research officer in intergovernmental relations long ago, and now I'm deputy minister. And it is this question in AI about judgment and discernment. And the thing I think lots about is, so I can reflect on my path and how I developed the skills of judgment and discernment for the purposes of our work. And I think about, well, how are we going to get that with new employees? How will they develop those skills in the same way? And it's probably a failure of imagination on my part. It's not that it can't be done with AI, with different systems in the workplace. But it's one of the sort of the deep questions that exists on this, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I'd now like to turn to innovation and economic growth, the title of the panel's conversation. And as I'm sure, Baljit, you will also know this, there's a lot of pressure on universities to demonstrate their return on investment. That is, governments are making a major investment in universities and in university research. What is the impact? What is the economic impact of that research? And I had talked a bit at the outset about all of the great things U of A has done to drive economic growth here in Alberta. But to be frank, it's not always an easy path from research to commercialization to economic impact. And I may have made it sound easy in my opening remarks, but in fact, it's not. And there's a real challenge here in universities in that we're expert at research. We're expert at driving big research grants that produce papers and publications and win Turing Awards and do all of these wonderful things that we do in universities. But we're not particularly expert at the commercialization of that research. That's an entirely different skill set from what most of our researchers have. Our researchers are brilliant researchers. They're publishing in journals around the world. But how do you actually turn that idea into an enterprise that will be successful? As many of you in the room will know, that's a completely different skill set. One that quite frankly, is bewildering to many of our researchers. They don't even know where to begin to take this great idea of theirs and to turn this into something that will have commercial potential. Now, we think a lot about this at the University of Alberta, and that, again, is Dave Bressler's role as VP of Innovation, is to think about how we can support our colleagues in commercialization of that research. One thing we've done at the University of Alberta is establish our own innovation fund where we are investing risk capital in commercialization of research coming out of the University of Alberta. That is a first for the University of Alberta to actually invest equity and take an equity position in research coming out of the University of Alberta. And we talked a little bit about the Valley of Death and how you get these great ideas, but how do you attract that investment? Now, Shannon, I'd like to begin with you because I know this is a topic dear to the heart of the government of Alberta and wants to see more impact from the research it funds at the not only at the University of Alberta, but other universities across Alberta. And in the case of the U of A, we have a research income of around $650 million a year from the province, the feds, and industry partners. And I think government is quite rightly looking to us and saying, what is the return on that very massive investment? And how can we facilitate that? And so, of course, we're keen to work with the government of Alberta. We're keen to work with our researchers. But it's important to understand that is still a big leap for universities to do. It's not really part of our core expertise. Historically, it hasn't really been part of the DNA of a university. So it requires a bit of a culture shift on behalf of universities. It also requires support. And in particular, and this is something I'm really passionate about, is we need to recognize the value of that as universities and reward that and recognize that as part of a valuable contribution that our researchers make. It's not just about publications and research grants and Turing Awards and Nobel Prizes. It's also about what is the impact, the commercial impact of your research, and we value that as a university. And that's one reason why we've taken and developed the Innovation Fund to demonstrate to our researchers, not only do we value this, we're prepared to invest in this because we think this is a great idea with commercial potential. But Shannon, I'd like to hear from you. I know, as I mentioned, this is dear to the heart of the government of Alberta. What is the government of Alberta doing to assist in this? And what is the government of Alberta looking for?
Yeah, well, I think that's very fair. It's been a focus for the government of Alberta since it was an articulated focus in the Skills for Jobs, Alberta 2030 Building Skills for Jobs strategy, put a very clear sort of focus on research commercialization, which I think was a recognition, Bill, of what you've described, right? That wasn't really what the purpose of research in universities was. It was a shift. And so we were trying to signal the importance of that shift. We accompanied that signal with, in Alberta, we have, for all of our publicly funded post-secondary institutions, these things called investment management agreements, which lay out a series of performance targets for the institutions, and now currently up to 40% of the funding that the government of Alberta provides to the institutions is at risk based on meeting the targets in those investment management agreements. And for the 4 comprehensive academic research universities, so the U of A, the U of C, the University of Lethbridge, and Athabasca University, there are targets around research commercialization, which is, I think, intended to be a sort of a mutually beneficial signal for the administration of the institutions in, as Bill described, thinking about rewards and recognizing work beyond the traditional publications, but trying to say this is important as well. So that's probably the sort of the macro tool that we're using. There's lots of my colleagues in the Department of Technology and Innovation and with the agency Alberta Innovates have a number of different programs that are available to support various research initiatives and commercialization. And again, that ministry working with us recently released the updated technology innovation strategy, of which the Intellectual Property Office was an important component of that. Will be launched as part of Alberta Innovates to provide further support and to the range of institutions and entities that create intellectual property in the province, and we'll work closely with the research offices of the universities. And then, as I say, we are working and have been for some time to update our intellectual property framework so that it's clear about, again, those expectations for the institutions in a more concrete way. But fundamentally, a very strong interest on the part of the government of Alberta in that commercialization of research, as well as recognizing the value we have with a number of really significant integrated data sets, particularly in the healthcare field, that can enable further research and impact in society.
Thank you. Baljit, I'm curious to hear from the University of Saskatchewan on this.
I mean, one of the things about the universities is that quite often what they do is not very explicit to the society. We send our children to the university, they get a degree, we come out. Thousands of people drive on the street in front of University of Saskatchewan every day. How often they think, how does this machine works every day? Similarly, the contribution that universities have made to economic development has always been there, but it's not very explicit. We have not spoken about that. And another point is that the process from discovering something new to creating a gizmo out of that, to put it in the hands of the communities, sometimes is quite long. And we understand that. And we have always been trying to speed it up. I think pandemic showed us that when really a crisis is there, we can speed up the development of the vaccine from the basic science, which was done many, many years ago in Vancouver or in New York or some other place. So I think that is the spectrum in which we are. Now I want to bring it down to Canada as to where the universities in Canada are situated compared to what might be in the US. In the US, large amount of research and development is done in the private sector. You have very large companies. They carry the bulk of the R&D development. They have contracts with the university researchers to do a small project, big project to feed into that. And then it automatically is driving the development of new technology, new product, a new process. In Canada, our private sector's contribution to R&D is very small. So what the universities are there, they're asked to do each and every bit of the discovery all the way up to the technology readiness level 9 or 10. So that's why we are struggling in Canada at this point as to what is it the universities are supposed to be doing by taking on the mandate that in many other countries, in Germany or in the US, is taken on by the private sector. But there are some really strong positive examples. So within that, I want to highlight one example. A couple of years ago, I was in front of House of Commons Committee on Science and Research, and they were studying commercialization in Canada as to what the system looks like. And my understanding is Canadian innovation system is quite fragmented. We are trying to connect it, but I think we are not where we need to be. So I was struggling with picking up an example to present to them. I said, my colleague from Waterloo is going to talk about quantum or a BlackBerry or something. What do I talk about from University of Saskatchewan? So what I landed on was that University of Saskatchewan's Crop Development Center has produced 500 new varieties for agriculture producers in 50 years. That's one new crop variety every month. Now, there's not a better, robust innovation pipeline going from genomics to agronomy and putting it in the hands of the producers to create a $20 billion agri-food enterprise in the province of Saskatchewan. So this is the type of contribution the universities have made. University of Alberta is similar, Manitoba is similar in many ways. So there are examples that and the products that we make use of every day. Then I want to understand the system in a province. Our deputy minister has spoken about what's happening in Alberta. In Saskatchewan, we are really building a system which is for decades. It will serve us. Provincial government has signaled stability for the system by giving us 4-year funding agreements. So the post-secondary in Saskatchewan knows what their budgets are going to be for the next 4 years. That allows us to plan.
Shannon, are you listening to this? Write that down.
Okay, good. That's why. And then the province really developed, based on the urgence from the universities, a research strategy for the province of Saskatchewan. Not the commercialization. It has pillars: agriculture, energy, health, and so forth. It allows the post-secondary to work within those pillars and contribute to the provincial growth plan, which is a document that we all can read. So what I'm trying to make the point is, as long as the systems are not connected, we will always be struggling in the valley of death. It's the government, it's the private sector, it's the universities figuring out as to what is the most pressing matter they need to put their mind to. And the job of the government is to create stability for the post-secondary sector. Another example which will come, I think, Bill, I hope you will lead off on us on that, the defense piece, like how universities and the government in Canada is really working around defense to come together as a system to contribute to Canada's sovereignty agenda for the next few decades. So really, fragmented system, challenges in Canada, but the system still delivers quite often what the communities need within a province, within a city, and across the country. I can speak more about that, but really I will stop at this point and go to my other point.
Joy and Löki, would you like to add some remarks?
Thank you. I actually, as the panelists were speaking, I was thinking of 2 examples from the United States that I find to be really fascinating. The first comes out of California. And if folks have had an opportunity to go to Napa and drink some of their wine, I know I'm talking a lot about wine. One of the more interesting components is they've created something called the wine cluster, where the university informs the private sector around soil samplings and environmental impacts and around grape variations and around the different value add of wine products and of grapes to then inform the folks who are there to partake in the product. And it feeds into a structure and a system where they're working collaboratively to build up something that is very unique to the part of California that drives tourism and other opportunities for economic growth. In Alaska, we tried to model that with something called the Alaska Ocean Cluster. And the idea was 100% utilization of salmon. We are very good at getting the salmon out of the ocean, but then we just sell the fish fillets. We don't do anything else with the rest of the product. And so the idea was, how can the university provide input on what other products and value add to ensure that we have 100% utilization of that product for the benefit of our communities? Now, unfortunately, that is an example of a really good idea that wasn't well supported. There were private investors and some federal funds, but when one of those funding streams dried up, the entire model became unstable and collapsed. Now, I'm really interested in how we as government, when we see a good idea and we recognize and understand there might not necessarily be an immediate commercial application, there might not be an immediate return, how do we continue to invest so that we are able to actualize its potential? I think one of the key parts that I often talk about academia is we have to be able to fail, and that we have to also have the resources to then learn from that failure and pivot and iterate so that we're able to then take that knowledge and use it to launch into a new space that is going to be the solution to the issue that we have identified. And that is really where government comes in, and especially where public-private partnerships can really have some salience, is to ensure that there are resources available for that iterative approach that allows for failure, but also allows for the learning from that failure.
Oh, okay. Okay, I've got an interesting question from the audience, and if you want, just send in your questions. And I think maybe I'm going to turn this first to you, Shannon. A lot of the conversation in today's discussion is about economic benefits, skills, and jobs. But part of the fundamental contribution education makes to democracies and the economy as a whole is a well-rounded, informed, critical thinking electorate. How do we ensure that role remains fulfilled in the current, quote, skills for job, unquote, environment?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's one we think lots about in terms of the breadth of activities that happen in a post-secondary institution. I think part of when you think about, let me take a step back. In Alberta, in our post-secondary institutions, all degree programs receive approval from the Department of Advanced Education. They're reviewed in varying ways by the Campus Alberta Quality Council, and a recommendation is made to the minister to review the programs. So for degree programs, because I think there is a bit of a qualitative difference between some of the programming at a certificate or a diploma level within a college setting, but certainly for a degree program in the universities, there is a pan-Canadian quality standard that ministers of education agreed to 20 years ago, that guides all degree programs across the country, that is in turn reflected in the Alberta Credential Framework that describes what are the attributes of a degree program, and which are then the basis of assessment by the Campus Alberta Quality Council. So all that to say that for a degree program, I mean, it is not simply, I mean, the discipline, the nature of the programming may be more connected to labor market outcomes and what sort of where citizens will be successful in getting employment at the end of the degree. But the idea inherent in a degree is developing those critical thinking skills that are part of well-rounded citizenship. So I think that's implicit in the construct.
Yeah, and if I might also do a shout out for the government of Alberta, that is your support for the Peter Lougheed School for Politics and Democracy at the University of Alberta, which is specifically directed at critical thinking skills, and particularly an informed. What does it mean to be an informed citizen in a free and democratic society? And so there is that commitment, but I know the economic development also takes up a lot of the oxygen.
It was the topic of it is a topic in fairness.
But it is also a very important function of universities. But I'm curious to hear thoughts from our other panelists. Yes.
Well, I'm going to take the bait. So I have been probably one of the most vocal in opposition to my University Board of Regents, which recently decided to remove the terms diversity, equity, inclusion from all of our public-facing documents and internal governance structures. Now, for me, as someone who is studying in Indigenous studies, that means that I'm currently held in the International Review Board hell. All of the protocols for research in Indigenous communities really talk about an equity focus, about ensuring that you have diverse voices, because we have 13 tribal groups in our state, and they want a fair representation of each one of those groups when you're talking about Indigenous ways of knowing. It has created a situation and circumstance where my entire graduate committee retired early this year, and I have no one with a PhD who is able to help me do my International Review Board protocols. It is making it where we are experiencing real threats in the United States on academic integrity, on ensuring that our students do become independent thinkers, to recognize that there is different perspectives and they should have a seat at the table, because that's helping our students learn about a broader perspective and a more diverse world where they are prepared for the global climate, that they are able to enter into spaces and challenge misinformation or disinformation. Now, I often quote Martin Luther King Jr. and his essay, The Purpose of Education. And in it, he talks about the whole structure of this system is to help create individuals who are able to challenge propaganda, that they are able to contribute to their community as critical thinkers. And unfortunately, what I am witnessing here as I hopefully complete my academic journey is a real threat to that system. And so when I look and consider how do I as a policymaker protect the academic institutions, one thing that I am absolutely passionate about is ensuring that we have a system that isn't creating robots, but is in creating the future citizens, the future electorate, the folks that are going to take my job, hopefully. Because I want somebody who's going to challenge ways of knowing, who are going to challenge systems, who are going to be the ones who say, should we turn on that kill switch in the AI button and the killer robots are going to take us all out? Or maybe we hold off and we think about different applications and different ways to build a more moral and ethic community, morally and ethical community.
Thank you.
I think if I may make a comment, here, this is where I believe the real regional cooperation among the universities could really help. Scientific projects come because there's a funding mechanism. Two professors get together, they get $1 million, we do a work. But I think teaching is something which happens all the time. It happened 50 years ago in departments of sociology. It's happening today in the departments of sociology. There's a stable system of education and graduation in the universities. But each university is not equipped to deliver each and every type of credential education program. And I think in a region like ours, Pacific Northwest, there exists a great opportunity to provide education so that we can graduate the type of citizens who can stand up on their own 2 feet, think critically, and challenge the system. If a particular challenge, for example, in the States, we are removing EDI from the documents. In Canada, we are not doing that. So could there be a cooperation between the universities so that students keep on learning what they need to learn? At University of Saskatchewan, we believe that true economic development requires really strong education, whether in polytechnics or in the universities. Over the last 20 years, the number of indigenous students at University of Saskatchewan has grown from 5% of the student body in 2005 to about 15% today, which mirrors the demographics of the indigenous population in the province. I believe if somebody were to do a correlative study, you could also see at the same time rise in the economic contributions which are being made by the First Nation and the Métis communities in the province to the prosperity of Saskatchewan. So I think there is this very nuanced, subtle connection between these entities. And I believe that one of the things which we could do together is to figure out these teaching mechanisms between Alaska, Washington, Montana, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and somehow figure that piece out. Last point, which is getting eroded each and every day because of pressures within the university on the times of the professors and the students, is the debate. When was the last time we truly had a debate in a university on a topic of a major significance? When I was a young professor, I began a process at University of Saskatchewan where president of the university would debate with the president of the student union every year about the state of the university. Bill, you may want to start that. And for 4 or 5 years, Peter McKinnon, who was the president, who loved the debate, it was the highlight of the year. Student and the president debating about the university, what a university is. I think we need to bring some sort of a debate back into the university. Over to you, please.
I love that idea. I'm deeply saddened by this conversation, right? As many of us are in the States. I'll be brief. I think civic discourse needs to be fostered and elevated worldwide, but particularly in the United States. We don't have safe places. Disagreement has become embattlement and personal. And so I would love to see higher education set that standard of respectful debate, civic discourse, and resolution of conflict. I think it's paramount. On the topic of DEI, I'm a federally funded entity, so we do not have a DEI policy, language, or any metrics associated with that. However, equity, access, and inclusion to all the things that we're talking about is an economic development issue. It is a math issue. It is a prosperity issue. It is not about giving some people a leg up over others. It is simply the human thing to do, and one that creates a civil society, one that prospers together, one that generates revenue, that generates economic opportunity of families that are surviving and thriving, products that reach new markets, innovations. It is an economic issue, but again, we have eliminated that as well. And I think it buries not just the human component of that, but certainly will be an impediment to economic growth in the future for the United States.
Yeah, thank you. We touched on a challenging topic, and certainly one that we're watching closely in Canada. And to me, it raises a broader question about trust. And trust is really the currency of collaboration, and it's how universities can collaborate. And it's something we spend a lot of time in the university sector is worrying about declining trust in the university sector and the increasing discord and rancor that you see, perhaps particularly in the United States, although we are not immune in Canada from these pressures. And so my question to the panelists is, what is driving this decline in trust? And I think it's a variety of factors. It's cost, it's perceived value of an education, it's the perception of what's going on in universities. And again, it's not just universities that we see a decline in trust, a decline in trust in institutions across the board. What's driving this? And I know this is something in universities we worry about all the time because trust is our lifeblood. It is essential to the well-being of universities that we be seen as trusted parts of society. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts about what's driving this and any advice for us in universities and what we can do to rebuild that trust.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Well, I'm going to take it as I'm a millennial, and I'm not sure if there's any other millennials in the room, or maybe I'm in the Oregon Trail generation, that very weird 1979 to 1983 kind of micro generation where we all played Oregon Trail, which is a lovely game if you've seen the recent version where they have Indigenous input into the actual application. But one of the things I was told when I was very young is that I was going to university. There was no question about it, particularly as a child of enslaved peoples. It is something that is very important to my family to ensure that we have the economic opportunity and just the credentials behind us as we enter into spaces that we're typically not dominated in. And then I had to get the paycheck to pay for that university. And as I was getting the paycheck to pay for my tuition, I then had to pay for my food and my room and board. And then, of course, there was all of the fees that were associated in the books. And as I kept going through the process, they said, well, your bachelor's isn't going to be enough. You're going to have to get a master's if you really want to earn the big dollars. And I went and did that. And a part of that work that I committed to was public service. And the federal government in the United States came out and said, well, we're going to create the public service student loan forgiveness program, that if you commit 10 years to us, we'll pay off your student loans. So I did that. I went to the Peace Corps and served 4 years, making less than $4,000 a year, but giving all of my personal sacrifice and expertise to help a community that desperately needed the resource that I had, which was my time and talent. And I came back and I applied for that loan forgiveness, and I was denied under the Trump administration. 1 million Americans became qualified to get their student loan forgiveness under the first Trump administration, and only 30 were given loan forgiveness. And then, of course, we had a new presidency, and he forgave 1 million loans. And everyone came unglued because they assumed that we were all McDonald's workers and that we hadn't earned that loan forgiveness, even though it had been promised to us. It is difficult to have trust in institutions and in systems when they promise you one thing and then rip it away and then tell you it's your fault for asking for what you were due. I have many friends who are in a similar boat as myself. We worked for our state governments. We worked for our municipal governments. We were promised that if we gave this, we would get a retirement that we could rely on, that we could be proud of. And yet the folks who are right above us all have pensions, but we have 401ks that, of course, if you are familiar with 2008, we lost a lot. And we're not able to necessarily participate in the same way because we don't have the resources to be putting into our 401ks. We're just trying to buy our first house at 40. It is very challenging to trust the systems when the systems seem to all be stacked against you. There was a recent report that came out that said we're about to go through the largest wealth transfer across the United States. The boomers are all unfortunately passing away, and their resources are going to come to us millennials. However, it's too late. It's too late for us. And so, of course, my friends who have children, they're telling them to not pursue the liberal arts degrees or go off and ensure that they can get that sociology degree or the psychology degree. They're saying, go become a heavy equipment operator or go get your certification in electrical work. And everyone is saying this is going to be how you earn six figures. But I know the data. I know that those who do not have a 4-year degree have a lower life expectancy. I know that they're not going to be the decision makers sitting at the table making the laws. They're not going to be the lawyers who interpret those laws, and they're definitely not going to be the judges who tell you whether you're going to have your civil rights honored or your reproductive rights honored. So the whole system feels stacked against young people at this moment, and it's challenging to say, trust us or trust in these systems when we're watching them as they have completely left us behind.
This is, thank you, really, and thank you very much for that. And coming to the universities and the trust relationship, I think a lot about that. And there's again erosion of a couple of things which we have seen happen, whether willingly or knowingly or unknowingly. When was the last time you saw a university professor give a talk at a public library? No. So the question is, when society is clamoring for knowledge, AI, pandemic, global geopolitical wars, conflicts everywhere, DEI issues and indigenous land rights and all of that piece, where do they get information? If universities are the trusted source of knowledge, then why our professors are not going out into the public arena and talking about that? I challenge the chairs at university. There are research chairs of all types at the universities to honor, recognize the excellent professors. We have about 140. I meet with them twice a year. Every time I request them, please write an opinion piece in a local newspaper. And if you wrote one every 3 years, we will have one every week in a local newspaper about the topic that you are studying, from the why there is a border between US and Canada, indigenous rights, artificial intelligence. What does Vaccine Institute does at University of Saskatchewan? Nobody does. 750 words. Possibly they can type it in 10 minutes and the local newspaper will publish it. So I think the failure lies at the part of the universities, because citizens do not see a university in action in public arena. That is the problem. And unless we are willing to rectify it, the trust issue will all. We can have the government convinced of our value. They will give us the money. We will publish papers, develop tech. We will do it all. But the broader public does not see us as contributing to their wellness, their sustainability, their prosperity. There's a shining example. I always go back to agriculture. Agriculture producers in Saskatchewan do truly believe that University of Saskatchewan, the College of Agriculture and Bioresources, helps them each and every day. So again, we can learn from examples like that. The land grant mission of the agricultural universities in the States, I was at Texas A&M. It's a shining example of community engagement. So I think we need to figure that piece out, Bill, as to how do we encourage our professors and how do we value that contribution of the professors being in the community as part of their annual tenure, promotion, merit evaluations, right? So I think we need to figure that. If you ask me, that's the one point where we are losing ground quite actively. Thank you.
I applaud that. I think that's would do a lot to connect communities back to the purpose of academics and faculty and university. However I can support that, I would encourage every faculty member to be accessible, and simply a newspaper or a public library or a quick YouTube video as well, right? Snapchat if you must, or whatever it is. So I'm a Gen Xer. I don't fit any, right? It is what it is. But nonetheless, I do think that when I went to institutions, so I was in the AmeriCorps, the national program first year out of high school. I got a stipend for $5,000, and it paid my way through my 4 years of university at Western Washington University. I came out debt-free. And so I think that the cost is certainly a variable, and whether there's loan forgiveness or a promise of a salary to pay off that debt, I think it is a very real issue with 4 years, with 2 years, and in fact with any training or education, because the reality of individuals and families is financially stretched. And we see that with dislocated workers and the resources to support them, as well as they need to think about their mortgage and their family and childcare and all these and transportation, and the list goes on and on. So I think cost is a real variable there. But I think there's also an innovation in that space that would make a lot of sense, is that there needs to be, we've often talked about on-ramps and off-ramps. And I don't think that's come to fruition in a way that is as innovative as we could make it. And some of that may be accreditation. Some of it may be, I mean, did you walk away with a credential? Do you qualify for, student loan or workforce Pell or whatever that financial assistance may be? But I think that there's innovation in that space where I always say that university or higher education makes sense with a purpose. When you have a purpose for going, it makes sense, and you can catalyze that education in a way that is most likely economic advantageous, right? The data is there. What I haven't seen, and perhaps Canada has done a better job than the States in this, I have not seen the economic resilience indicators of apprenticeships and trades. And I think really looking at the trajectory of trades and 2-year degrees and 4-year degrees, and look at the interception. So we talk about data models. This is an opportunity to data model and to learn about those pathways that people are taking as they navigate, maybe starting at community college, going into a trade, eventually going back into university. I think that there's a lot to be learned on how people have navigated higher education and various learning resources, and to think about how we might provision for those exits and on-ramps and off-ramps throughout career. Because what I do know without a doubt is that lifelong learning is imperative, and that it doesn't stop. And then the question is how is the education ecosystem broadly and all-encompassing supporting workers as they navigate through their careers and technological changes and occupational and life and all the things that happen. So
I think we're almost out of time, but a last word to you, Shannon.
Oh, last word, geez. A couple things I'd maybe say, right? Like sitting in government, I think lots about just institutions, trusted institutions. There's obviously an effect of, and I think about it with our own service delivery, like competency of service delivery, right? So the competency of a citizen's interaction with government is a big factor in their trust in the institution. Out of the abstract, did that interaction deliver in a timely, meaningful way? So that's sort of one thought that I think that universities have been caught up in, right, as any other institution, and that pressure is intensified as the costs have gone up, because we know this from lots of research that if you pay more, you expect more. So as tuition goes up, and I experienced this with my own daughter in her first year of university, who sometimes will tell me what they did, and I think, okay, that's what you did today, right? You have a little bit of that, and you think, oh, okay, and I do think about, well, I think my standards or how I react to that probably differs from how my parents might have thought about that when my tuition was a lot less than her tuition is. So, I think that's a sociological phenomenon, right? That we're into. What I will just say on the last point on apprenticeship is Alberta's the apprenticeship is quite different in Canada than how it's sort of structured in the United States. And Alberta, because of a long history of significant heavy industrial construction, people in the skilled trades who've done apprenticeships have generally quite high economic returns. And so it sort of plays out differently than maybe it does in other jurisdictions. But plenty there to talk about.
Well, I think a wide-ranging and fascinating conversation. So please join me in extending our appreciation to our panelists.